A giant leopard collapses at the zoo, and what the other leopards do next is beyond belief. At first, everyone thinks it's just a medical emergency, but then the animals start acting in ways no one can explain. A young zoologist senses something darker, something no one else wants to admit. As the powerful director scrambles to cover it up, strange truths begin to surface, truths that could destroy everything. The more she digs, the more dangerous it becomes, because someone will do anything to keep the secret buried. Why are the leopards reacting like this? What is really happening behind the gates of the zoo? And when the truth finally comes out, will it save lives or cost them? You being here is a reminder. The quiet acts of love and kindness still matter. If you hold space for compassion, you're already part of this community. The summer sun casts playful shadows through the trees surrounding the leopard enclosure at Cedar Valley Zoo. Children press their faces against the viewing glass, their excited chatter filling the air as parents pointed out the magnificent creatures lounging. On the rocky outcrops inside, Dr. Eliza Rowan stood slightly apart from the crowd, her practiced eyes scanning the habitat. After 3 years as a junior zoologist at the zoo, she knew every inch of this enclosure and every habit of its residents. Something felt off about Balthazar today. The largest and oldest of their leopards, the massive cat, lay on his favorite sunning rock, his golden coat gleaming. But his usual regal posture was missing. His head drooped slightly, and his sides heaved with each breath in a way that made Eliza's professional instincts tingle with concern. "Look, Mommy, the big one's getting up." A little girl squealed, pointing. At Balthazar, Eliza watched as the leopard attempted to stand. His powerful legs trembled, something she had never seen before in all her years of observing him. The crowd gasped as Balthazar swayed unsteadily. "Something's wrong," Eliza muttered, already reaching for her radio. Before she could call for backup, Balthazar's legs gave out completely. The magnificent creature crashed onto his side, his massive body going limp against the sun-warmed stone. Screams erupted from the gathered families. Children began to cry, and parents pulled their little ones away from the glass. Eliza's heart pounded as she watched Balthazar's chest rise and fall in shallow, irregular movements. "Everyone, please remain calm." The commanding voice of Malcolm Cray, the zoo director, cut through the chaos. He strode toward the enclosure in his perfectly pressed suit, radiating authority. "This is a completely routine occurrence. Sometimes our animals simply need a rest, especially on warm days like today." Eliza fought back a frown as she watched Cray smooth-talk the crowd. There was nothing routine about this. She had spent countless hours observing Balthazar, learning his patterns and behaviors. The proud leopard had always moved with grace and strength, even in his advancing years. "Dr. Rowan," Cray called out, his tone dismissive. "Please ensure the viewing area is cleared while our friend takes his nap." "Sir," Eliza started, her voice firm despite her racing heart. "Balthazar's breathing pattern is completely abnormal. This isn't normal fatigue. Look at how shallow and rapid his respirations are." Cray's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "Thank you for your input, Doctor, but I'm sure our senior veterinary staff can handle any actual concerns. Please focus on your assigned duties." The crowd slowly dispersed, but Eliza couldn't tear her eyes away from Balthazar's prone form. The leopard's chest barely moved now, each breath seeming to take more effort than the last. This was no ordinary collapse. Something was terribly wrong with the magnificent creature she had come to know so well. She watched as Balthazar's golden eyes, usually so alert and intense, fluttered weakly. Years of working with these animals had taught her their normal patterns, their natural behaviors. This was something else entirely. The unnatural way his muscles had given out, the irregular breathing pattern. It all pointed to something sinister. As the last of the visitors moved away, Eliza's mind raced through possibilities. Disease? Injury? But none of those explained the sudden onset or the specific symptoms she was observing. A horrible suspicion began to form in her mind, but she pushed it aside for now, focusing instead on the immediate need to help Balthazar. Need to document this, she whispered to herself, pulling out her phone to record Balthazar's symptoms and vital signs. Whatever was happening here, she knew deep in her bones that it wasn't as simple as Cray wanted everyone to believe. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the enclosure as Eliza stood her ground, watching over Balthazar while supposedly clearing the viewing area. She couldn't shake the feeling that this moment marked the beginning of something much bigger than a simple medical emergency. Something was very wrong at Cedar Valley Zoo, and Balthazar's collapse might just be the first piece of a much larger. Puzzled out through the viewing glass, she could see the gentle rise and fall of Balthazar's chest, growing even more labored. The proud creature who had captured the hearts of countless visitors now lay vulnerable, and still, his usual majesty replaced by an unsettling frailty. Eliza's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her determination growing with each passing moment. Whatever was happening here, she would get to the bottom of it, for Balthazar's sake, and for all the animals under her care. The piercing screams of terrified visitors filled the air as Balthazar's massive form lay motionless on the ground. Children pressed against their parents' legs, while others backed away from the viewing glass, pointing and whispering in horror. Security guards appeared seemingly out of nowhere, their blue uniforms a stark contrast against the gathering crowd. "Everyone, please remain calm and proceed to the nearest exit," a guard announced through a megaphone, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "This is just a precautionary measure." Eliza's heart raced as she watched Malcolm Cray stride purposefully toward the growing chaos, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. He adjusted his tie and plastered on what she recognized as his media-ready smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Malcolm announced, his voice carrying that practiced tone of authority, "I want to assure you that everything is under control. Our veterinary team is handling the situation, and there's absolutely nothing to be concerned about. These things happen from time to time with elderly animals." Eliza stepped forward, her clipboard clutched tightly to her chest. "Mr. Cray, I really think we should—" "Dr. Rowan." Malcolm cut her off smoothly. "Why don't you help guide our guests toward the exit? Leave the medical decisions to our senior staff." The dismissal stung, but Eliza held her ground. "Sir, Balthazar's symptoms aren't consistent with—" "That will be all, Dr. Rowan." His words were sharp despite his pleasant smile, his eyes warning her to back down. As the crowd dispersed, Eliza watched the emergency veterinary team rush into the enclosure. Something wasn't right. She'd known Balthazar for 3 years, observed his every habit, his routines. This collapse wasn't natural. Instead of following Malcolm's dismissive order, Eliza slipped away to her office. The small room was cluttered with research papers and animal behavior logs, but she knew exactly where to find what she needed. Pulling out the feeding records for the past month, she spread them across her desk and began to study them intently. Hours passed as she pored over the documentation. Her coffee grew cold beside her, forgotten as patterns began to emerge. Something caught her eye, subtle inconsistencies in the handwriting, dates that didn't quite match up. She pulled out her own observation notes and compared them. "This can't be right," she muttered, circling another discrepancy with her red pen. According to the official logs, Balthazar had been given his regular diet every day at 6 o'clock in the morning. But her own notes showed days when the great leopard had barely touched his food, something she'd found unusual at the time. A knock at her door made her jump. "Come in," she called, hastily organizing the scattered papers. Dr. Thompson, one of her senior colleagues, peered in. "Eliza, what are you still doing here?" "The situation's been handled," Balthazar's resting comfortably. "Mark, look at this," she said, holding up the feeding logs. "These records have been altered. See these dates?" The handwriting changes subtly, and, "Oh, Eliza," Thompson sighed, shaking his head. "Not everything is a conspiracy. You're still new here, and I know you care about the animals, but sometimes these things just happen. Don't let your imagination run wild." "This isn't imagination," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "Something's wrong with these records, and Balthazar's collapse wasn't natural. I know what I saw." "Listen to yourself," Thompson said, his tone patronizing. "Malcolm's already explained that this is normal for aging animals. Don't make trouble where there isn't any. It won't help your career." After Thompson left, Eliza sat in her dimly lit office, the weight of being dismissed yet again settling heavily on her shoulders. But as she looked at the evidence spread before her, her determination only grew stronger. The feeding log showed clear signs of tampering, dates erased and rewritten, quantities adjusted, entire entries that didn't match the handwriting of the regular keepers. Taking a deep breath, she began to make detailed notes of every inconsistency she found. Someone had been systematically altering these records, and if her suspicions were correct, they'd been tampering with more than just paperwork. The timing of Balthazar's collapse, the strange behavior leading up to it, the altered feeding logs, it all pointed to deliberate poisoning. Her hand trembled slightly as she documented her findings, but her resolve was ironclad. They might dismiss her as young and inexperienced, but she knew what she was seeing. Something sinister was happening at the zoo, and Balthazar's collapse was just the beginning. "I won't let them ignore this," she whispered to herself, carefully, organizing her evidence into a folder. The truth was right here in black and white, hidden in the altered numbers and changed dates. Someone had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks, but they hadn't counted on her attention to detail. As the evening shadows lengthened across her office floor, Eliza carefully tucked the damning evidence into her bag. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she had work to do. Balthazar's life might depend on what she did next. Dr. Eliza Rowan's hands trembled slightly as she clutched the feeding logs while marching toward Malcolm Cray's office. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows did nothing to warm the chill of anxiety in her chest. She had spent hours documenting the inconsistencies, and now the evidence was undeniable. Without knocking, she pushed open the heavy wooden door. Malcolm looked up from his desk, his expression darkening at her unannounced entrance. "Mr. Cray, I need to show you something urgent," Eliza said, spreading the papers across his polished desk. "These feeding logs don't add up. Someone's been tampering with Balthazar's food schedule, and I think Dr. Rowan." Malcolm cut her off sharply, his face reddening. "This is completely inappropriate. I don't appreciate you barging in here with wild accusations." "But sir, look at these entries," Eliza persisted, pointing to specific dates. "The amounts don't match our standard protocols. Something's wrong." And Balthazar's collapse. Malcolm stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Enough. You're becoming paranoid. Dr. Rowan, this obsession with the leopard is affecting your judgment." "I'm not obsessed," Eliza protested, her voice wavering slightly. "I'm doing my job. These animals are my responsibility." "Your job?" Malcolm's laugh was cold. "Your job is what I say it is. And right now, you're on very thin ice. Drop this nonsense immediately, or you might find yourself looking for employment elsewhere." "Do I make myself clear?" Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm giving you a friendly warning," Malcolm said, his tone anything but friendly. "Now get out of my office." Defeated and shaking, Eliza gathered her papers and stumbled out into the hallway. She leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Everything she had worked for, Everything she believed in, it all felt like it was crumbling around her. She made her way outside, needing fresh air. The maintenance area behind the leopard enclosure was quiet, away from the usual tourist paths. Eliza sat down heavily on a wooden bench, dropping her head into her hands. "You okay there, Dr. Rowan?" The gentle voice startled her. She looked up to see Jonas Hawley, the maintenance worker, standing nearby with his tool belt. His weathered face showed genuine concern. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then sighed. "Actually, no. I'm not fine at all." Jonas hesitated, then sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I've seen how you are with the animals. You really care about them. Not like some of the others who just see them as attractions. Fat lot of good that does me," Eliza said bitterly. "Nobody listens. Nobody believes me when I say something's wrong." Jonas was quiet for a long moment, fidgeting with a wrench in his hands. I might have seen something," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Eliza's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "A few nights ago, I was doing some late maintenance work," Jonas said, glancing around nervously. "I saw someone by the leopard enclosure. Someone who shouldn't have been there." "Who?" Eliza leaned forward, her heart racing. "Malcolm's nephew, Tyler. He was sneaking around, acting real suspicious-like. I thought about reporting it, but..." Jonas shrugged helplessly. "Who's gonna listen to the maintenance guy?" Eliza felt a surge of hope mixed with anger. "I'll listen." "Please, Jonas, tell me everything you saw." As Jonas described the details of that night, the time, the way Tyler had been carrying something, how he'd rushed away when he thought he'd been spotted, Eliza felt something shift inside her. She wasn't alone anymore. Someone else had seen something wrong. Someone else cared enough to speak up. "Thank you," she said quietly when he finished. "You have no idea how much this means." Jonas gave her a small, encouraging smile. "Maybe we could help each other? Keep our eyes open. Share what we notice?" Eliza nodded, feeling stronger than she had all day. "Yes, I'd like that. We need to be careful, though. Malcolm just threatened my job, and I'm sure he wouldn't hesitate to do the same to you." "Some things are worth the risk," Jonas said simply. "These animals deserve better than being treated like they don't matter." In that moment, looking at Jonas's honest face and hearing the conviction in his voice, Eliza felt the first real spark of hope since Balthazar's collapse. She wasn't just the overreacting junior zoologist anymore. She had an ally, someone who understood what was at stake. "We'll figure this out," she said with newfound determination. "Together." Jonas nodded, standing up and adjusting his tool belt. "Together," he agreed, and in that single word, Eliza heard the promise of support she'd been desperately needing. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the leopard enclosure as Eliza stood at the observation point, her clipboard pressed tightly against her chest. What she witnessed made her breath catch in her throat. The usually independent leopards were acting with an eerie synchronization she'd never seen before. 3 female leopards paced back and forth along the front barrier, their muscular shoulders rolling with each step, their golden eyes fixed on the visitors with an intensity that made several people step back. Behind them, 2 younger males prowled the perimeter, their low growls rising and falling in an unsettling harmony. "Look at how they're moving," Eliza whispered to Jonas, who stood beside her, his weathered hands gripping the railing. "It's like they're protecting him," Jonas finished, nodding toward where Balthazar lay in the shade of a large rock outcropping. The giant leopard's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. His usual majesty diminished, but not forgotten. A child pressed against the viewing glass, pointing. "Mommy, why are they so angry?" The mother quickly pulled her daughter back as one of the females slashed at the barrier with extended claws, leaving fresh marks on the reinforced material. The sound echoed through the viewing area, causing more visitors to retreat. "They know something's wrong," Eliza said, making notes on her clipboard. "This isn't just random agitation. Look at their positioning. They've created a defensive perimeter around Balthazar." Jonas shifted uncomfortably. "In all my years here, I've never seen them act like this. They're usually more independent." A collective gasp rose from the crowd as two of the leopards suddenly moved in perfect unison, both leaping onto elevated platforms on opposite sides of the enclosure. Their tails swished in matching rhythm, their eyes scanning the gathering crowd with calculated precision. "It's like they're standing guard," a visitor murmured. Malcolm Cray's voice cut through the growing tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, please step back from the viewing area." He strode forward, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. "We're implementing some temporary viewing restrictions while our veterinary team continues their work." Eliza noticed how Malcolm's confident smile faltered slightly when he looked at the coordinated movements of the leopards. For a man who claimed everything was routine, he seemed unsettled by their behavior. "Dr. Rowan," he called out, his voice carrying an edge of warning. "Don't you have paperwork to complete?" "I'm documenting behavioral changes," she replied, standing her ground. "This is unprecedented group behavior that needs to be recorded." Malcolm stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What needs to be recorded is what I tell you needs to be recorded. Are we clear?" Before Eliza could respond, a thunderous roar erupted from the enclosure. All 5 leopards had raised their voices in unison, the sound reverberating through the viewing area. Visitors scrambled back. Children clutched their parents' hands, and even Malcolm took an instinctive step backward. "This isn't natural," Jonas muttered, just loud enough for Eliza to hear. "Something's got them riled up, something fierce." Eliza nodded, her suspicions growing stronger by the minute. "They're responding to Balthazar's condition. They know he's been," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "compromised." Malcolm began herding visitors away from the area, his voice carrying forced cheerfulness. "Let's give our friends some space, shall we? The gift shop is offering a special discount today." As the crowd thinned, Jonas touched Eliza's elbow gently. "About what I saw, Malcolm's nephew. He was carrying something that night. Something. In a black case." Eliza's heart raced. "When exactly was this?" 3 nights ago, around 11:30. I was doing my final rounds, checking the service entrance locks." Jonas's voice dropped even lower. "He didn't see me, but I got a good look at him. He was wearing gloves, in summer." The leopards continued their synchronized patrol, their movements becoming more agitated as the sun began to set. Their golden eyes seemed to glow in the fading light, fixed on those who remained near their fallen leader. "I'll help you," Jonas said firmly, his usual quiet demeanor strengthened by resolve. "Whatever's going on here, it ain't right. These animals know it, and so do we." Malcolm's voice boomed from the entrance. "The leopard exhibit is now closed for the evening. All visitors must exit immediately." Eliza watched as the last few stragglers departed, leaving them alone with the sounds of steadily pacing paws and persistent growls. The leopards moved like shadows in the twilight, their coordinated movements a silent testament to something larger at stake, something that went beyond normal animal behavior. "Thank you," she said to Jonas, feeling for the first time since Balthazar's collapse that she wasn't completely alone in her fight. "We'll need to be careful. Malcolm's already made threats about my job." "Some things are more important than jobs," Jonas replied, his eyes fixed on Balthazar's still form. "Those animals know it. Maybe it's time we showed we know it too." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Eliza sat hunched over her desk late into the evening, surrounded by stacks of medical files and breeding records. Her eyes burned from hours of scrutinizing documents, but she couldn't stop. Not when each new page revealed another disturbing detail. "This can't be right," she muttered, comparing two sets of records side by side. The official breeding logs showed 3 successful litters from the Leopard program over the past 5 years. But the medical records told a different story. 6 litters, with multiple cubs seemingly vanishing without explanation. Eliza's hands trembled as she pulled up the digital archives on her computer. The timestamps on many files had been altered, but not all of them. Someone had been sloppy in their rush to cover their tracks. She found medication logs showing regular sedation doses for Balthazar that went far beyond normal protocols. They've been keeping him drugged," she whispered, her throat tight with anger. "That's why he's always been so docile during shows." The proud leopard's unusual calmness during public viewings, something the zoo had claimed was just his gentle nature, now took on a sinister meaning. A soft knock at her office door made her jump. It was Jonas, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, setting one beside her. His eyes widened at the spread of documents. "Found something?" "More than something." Eliza pushed back from her desk, running her fingers through her disheveled hair. "Look at these shipping manifests from the last 3 years. Every time we had a new litter, there were special equipment transfers to private collectors in Asia. The dates match perfectly." Jonas leaned in, frowning at the papers. "And these sedation records, they've been drugging Balthazar to keep him manageable while they steal his cubs," Eliza finished. "Malcolm's been running an illegal trafficking operation right under everyone's noses. That's why he's so desperate. To keep me quiet about Balthazar's collapse. The poor thing's body is finally giving out from years of forced sedation." The maintenance worker's usually calm face darkened with anger. "I've worked here 15 years. Never trusted Cray, but this," he shook his head. "What are you going to do?" Eliza stood, gathering the most damning documents into a folder. "I'm going to expose him. These records prove everything. The sedation, the missing cubs, the illegal shipments. It's all here. Be careful," Jonas warned. "Malcolm's got friends in high places, and he's not going to let this go easily." As if summoned by their conversation, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Malcolm Cray's massive frame filled the doorway, his face twisted with barely contained rage when he saw the scattered documents. "Working late, Dr. Rowan." His voice was dangerously soft. "I believe I warned you about pursuing these paranoid theories of yours." Eliza lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "They're not theories anymore, Mr. Cray. I know what you've been doing. The sedation, the trafficking, all of it. And I have proof." Malcolm's face flushed dark red. He stepped into the office, shutting the door behind him with deliberate slowness. "You understand nothing. Do you have any idea what it takes to keep a facility like this running? The compromises that have to be made? Stealing cubs from their mothers and selling them to the highest bidder isn't a compromise," Eliza shot back. "It's criminal." "It's business," Malcolm snarled. "And you're becoming very bad for business, Dr. Rowan." He moved closer, using his bulk to loom over her desk. "I'm giving you one last chance. Drop this now, or I promise you'll regret it." Jonas stepped forward, positioning himself between them. "You should leave, Mr. Cray." Malcolm's eyes flickered between them, calculating. Finally, he straightened his tie and stepped back. "Think very carefully about your next move, Dr. Rowan. Very carefully indeed." He turned and stalked out, leaving the threat hanging in the air. Eliza released a shaky breath, clutching the folder of evidence to her chest. The stakes had shifted dramatically. This wasn't just about saving one sick leopard anymore. It was about exposing years of systematic abuse and corruption. Looking at the medical records scattered across her desk, she could almost hear the frightened cries of cubs being torn from their mothers. see Balthazar's proud spirit being crushed under years of forced sedation. "We need to make copies of everything," she said firmly. "Multiple copies, stored in different places. And then we need to get this information to people who can actually do something about it." Jonas nodded grimly. "I'm with you. Whatever it takes." Eliza looked once more at the photo of Balthazar in his prime, before the years of drugging had taken their toll. "I promise," she whispered to the image. "I'm going to make this right." Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance as Eliza arrived at the zoo the next morning, her manila folder of evidence clutched tightly against her chest. Before she could even reach the staff entrance, two burly security guards stepped forward, their faces stern. "Dr. Rowan," one said gruffly, "I'm afraid your access has been revoked. Mr. Cray's orders." Eliza's heart pounded. "What? You can't do this. I work here." "Not anymore." Malcolm's voice cut through the morning air as he approached, wearing an expensive raincoat despite the humidity. "Consider yourself suspended pending an investigation into professional misconduct." "Misconduct?" Eliza's voice shook with anger. "You mean exposing your crimes?" Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "Search her belongings," he commanded the guards. "Any zoo property needs to be confiscated." Before Eliza could protest, they seized her folder, her research notes scattering in the rising wind. She watched helplessly as years of careful observations were gathered up and handed to Malcolm. Dark clouds loomed overhead as she backed away, tears stinging her eyes. The first fat raindrops began to fall just as Jonas came running from the maintenance shed. "Eliza!" He called out, but was blocked by security. A deafening crack of thunder made everyone jump. Through the growing storm, emergency alarms began blaring from inside the zoo. Visitors screamed. "Code red in Sector 4. Crackled a voice over the security radio. "Leopard enclosure breach." Eliza's blood ran cold. Sector 4, where they kept the younger males, all heavily sedated under Malcolm's orders. The same drugs that had nearly killed Balthazar. Without hesitation, she darted past the distracted guards, Jonas close behind. They raced through the rain-slicked paths as panicked visitors fled in the opposite direction. Lightning flashed, illuminating the chaos. "There!" Jonas pointed to where a young male leopard prowled near the children's zoo, confused and aggressive from the drugs in his system. His muscles trembled unnaturally, pupils dilated in the storm's darkness. "Everyone stay back," Eliza commanded, her voice carrying authority despite her drenched appearance. She slowly moved forward, hands raised non-threateningly. The leopard's tail lashed, a low growl rumbling in his chest. But Eliza recognized the fear beneath his aggression, the same fear she'd seen in Balthazar's eyes. "It's okay," she said softly, maintaining eye contact while carefully reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small tin of the herbal paste she developed to help calm stressed animals. The familiar scent caught the leopard's attention. "Eliza, be careful," Jonas whispered urgently from behind her. Lightning cracked again and the leopard tensed, ready to spring, but Eliza held her ground, speaking in low, soothing tones while slowly opening the tin. The paste's gentle aroma cut through the sharp ozone smell of the storm. The big cat's nostrils flared, taking in the calming scent. His muscles began to relax, confusion clearing from his drug-addled eyes as he recognized Eliza as a source of comfort, not threat. "That's it," she murmured. "You know me. I've always helped you, haven't I?" The leopard took a tentative step forward, then another. Behind him, Jonas was quietly coordinating with other staff to secure the temporary barriers needed to contain him safely. "Just a little closer," Eliza encouraged, her heart thundering but her hands steady. The leopard was now close enough that she could see the residual tremors from the sedatives coursing through his powerful frame. In that moment, as she connected with the magnificent creature before her, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that she'd been right all along. These animals deserved better than to be drugged into submission for profit. They deserved protection, respect, and understanding. Everything Malcolm had denied them. With perfect timing, Jonas and the team slid the barriers into place. The leopard, calmed by Eliza's presence and the herbal paste, allowed himself to be gradually guided back toward secure containment. As the immediate danger passed, Eliza became aware of the crowd of staff and visitors who had witnessed everything. Their faces showed not fear, but awe and recognition of her skill and courage. Malcolm pushed through the gathering, his expensive suit soaked through. "This changes nothing," he spat, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "You're still banned from these premises." "Actually, sir," one of the senior keepers stepped forward, "I think we all saw exactly why Dr. Rowan belongs here. That could have ended very differently without her expertise." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jonas moved to stand protectively beside Eliza, his quiet strength lending her support as she faced down her adversary in the pouring rain. The storm continued to rage overhead, but Eliza stood tall, knowing she had proven herself in the most meaningful way possible by putting the animals' welfare first, just as she always had. Thunder crackled overhead as Eliza's fingers trembled, while sorting through dusty file boxes in the zoo's records room. The storm outside matched her racing heart as she uncovered what she'd been searching for: shipping manifests with dates matching the disappearances of several leopard cubs. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents, connecting the dots. "Oh, my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain pelting the windows. The manifest showed mysterious shipments to private collectors across international borders, each coinciding perfectly with the times cubs had supposedly died in their sleep. Malcolm's signature was on every form, along with hefty payment. Records that far exceeded normal zoo operations. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cramped storage room just as a shadow fell across the doorway. Liza's blood ran cold. "I had a feeling I'd find you here." Malcolm's voice cut through the darkness. He stepped inside, his usual polished appearance now disheveled, his tie loose around his neck. "Always the thorough one, aren't you, Dr. Rowan?" Eliza clutched the documents to her chest, backing away. "It's over, Malcolm. I have proof of everything. The trafficking, the sedation, all of it." His laugh was hollow as he advanced. "And who exactly do you think will believe you? The idealistic junior zoologist who's been obsessing over a sick leopard?" In 2 quick strides, he closed the distance between them, yanking the papers from her grasp with surprising strength. "No." Eliza lunged for them, but Malcolm shoved her back against the filing cabinets. Papers scattered across the floor as thunder boomed outside. "You know what your problem is, Eliza." He gathered the documents, stuffing them into his jacket. "You care too much about the animals, about doing what's right. This is business, nothing personal. Those cubs trusted us." Eliza's voice shook with anger. "Balthazar trusted us." Malcolm's expression darkened. "Speaking of Balthazar," he seized her arm, forcing her toward the door. "I think it's time you two had a proper goodbye." Despite her struggles, Malcolm's grip was iron tight as he marched her through the empty corridors to the veterinary wing. The storm had driven away most visitors, leaving the zoo eerily quiet except for the occasional rumble of thunder. "What are you doing?" Eliza demanded as he unlocked the isolation area where Balthazar was being kept. "Giving you what you wanted. Quality time with your favorite patient." Malcolm pushed her inside the examination room. Through the internal barrier, she could see Balthazar's massive form in the adjacent enclosure, still weak but stirring restlessly. "Maybe when they find you in the morning, they'll blame your accident on your obsessive need to check on him." Such a tragedy. The door slammed shut behind her, the lock clicking with horrible finality Eliza pounded against it, her heart racing. "Malcolm, you can't do this." His muffled voice came through the door. "I already have. Goodbye, Dr. Rowan." Eliza's mind raced as she heard his footsteps fade away. The examination room was sealed off from the main corridor, with only the barrier gate between her and Balthazar's enclosure. If the sedated leopard became agitated, she pressed herself against the far wall, watching Balthazar through the barrier. His golden eyes were open now, tracking her movements. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Minutes stretched into hours as the storm raged outside. Eliza's legs trembled with exhaustion, but she didn't dare sit down. Balthazar had risen to his feet, pacing the barrier with increasing agitation. The effects of the sedatives were clearly wearing off. Just when her hope was fading, she heard a metallic scraping from the corridor. "Eliza?" Jonas's whispered voice carried through the door. "Are you in there?" "Jonas!" She nearly sobbed with relief. "Malcolm locked me in. Balthazar's in here too. The sedatives are wearing off. Hold on." There was more scraping, then a click, as Jonas worked at the lock with his maintenance tools. "I saw Malcolm leaving with your research files. Knew something was wrong when you didn't answer your phone." The lock finally gave way with a soft snap. Jonas eased the door open, his eyes wide as he took in the situation. "Easy now," he murmured, extending his hand to her, nice and slow. Eliza inched toward him, hyper-aware of Balthazar's golden gaze following her every move. Just as she reached the doorway, a deafening crack of thunder made the leopard roar. She stumbled forward into Jonas's arms, and he quickly pulled her through, slamming the door shut behind them. They held onto each other in the darkness of the corridor, both trembling. Eliza could feel Jonas's heart pounding as hard as her own. "You saved my life," she whispered. "I couldn't let anything happen to you," Jonas replied softly, his arms still protective around her. "Not after everything you've risked to help these animals." Through the door, they could hear Balthazar's restless movements, but for the moment, they were safe. Eliza looked up at Jonas, seeing him in a new light. In this quiet maintenance worker, she'd found more than just an ally. She'd found someone she could trust completely. "We need to stop Malcolm," she said firmly. "Tonight." Jonas nodded, his expression determined. Together. Malcolm's imposing figure filled the doorway, his normally pristine suit wrinkled from the day's chaos. Eliza clutched the manifest to her chest, her heart pounding. "Those don't belong to you," Malcolm said, his voice dangerously calm as he stepped into the room. "Hand them over, Dr. Rowan, and we can forget this unfortunate incident. Like you, forgot about all the cubs you sold." Eliza's voice shook but held firm. "Or how you've been sedating Balthazar to keep him docile." Malcolm's face darkened. In 3 quick strides, he crossed the room and snatched the papers from her hands, shoving them into his jacket. "You've become quite the nuisance, Dr. Rowan. I tried to be patient, to guide you toward a more practical approach to zoo management. But you insist on these wild theories. They're not theories when I have proof." Eliza backed away, but Malcolm blocked her path to the door. "Proof?" He laughed coldly. "You mean these shipping manifests for perfectly legal animal transfers? No one will believe your accusations. You're just the idealistic junior zoologist who couldn't handle the pressure." Before Eliza could react, Malcolm grabbed her arm and dragged her from the records room. She struggled, but his grip was like iron as he pulled her through the empty corridors. The storm raged outside, masking her calls for help. They reached the veterinary wing, where Balthazar lay in his recovery. "Cage." Malcolm shoved her inside the examination room, slamming the door behind them. The leopard's eyes tracked their movement, his breathing still shallow from the sedatives. "You want to be close to your precious animals?" Malcolm sneered, backing toward the door. "Then spend some quality time with Balthazar. By morning, either you'll have changed your mind about going public, or he left the threat hanging. The door clicked shut. Eliza heard the key turn in the lock, trapping her inside with the sedated but still dangerous Leopard. She pressed herself against the wall, mind racing. Her phone had no signal in the concrete-walled room. Minutes stretched into hours. The storm continued its assault outside, while Eliza carefully maintained her distance from Balthazar. Despite his weakened state, she knew better than to let her guard down around a predator of his size. Just when exhaustion began to overwhelm her, she heard movement in the hallway. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open to reveal Jonas. His maintenance uniform soaked from the rain. "Eliza," he whispered urgently, "are you okay?" "I saw Malcolm leaving, and something felt wrong." Relief flooded through her as she hurried to join him in the hallway. "Jonas, thank God. He has proof of everything. Shipping manifests showing his trafficking operation. But he took them." Jonas steadied her with gentle hands on her shoulders. "We'll figure something out. But first, let's get you somewhere safe." They made their way through the darkened zoo to Jonas's workshop, a cluttered but warm space that smelled of wood shavings and machine oil. As Eliza sank into a worn chair, Jonas handed her a cup of hot coffee from his thermos. "Malcolm's planning a donor gala next week," Jonas said, leaning against his workbench. "Trying to smooth things over after all the recent incidents. Every major donor and press outlet will be there." Eliza's hands tightened around the warm cup as an idea formed. "That's it. That's our chance to expose him. With everyone watching, he won't be able to hide the truth." "It's risky," Jonas cautioned. "He's already shown he's willing to go to extremes." "Which is exactly why we have to stop him," Eliza insisted. "Those animals can't speak for themselves. Someone has to stand up for them, no matter the cost." Jonas studied her face for a long moment before nodding. "Then we'll do it together. I've got access to the security footage from the past few months. It might not be as detailed as those manifests, but it shows plenty of suspicious, late-night activity." Eliza felt a surge of gratitude for this quiet, steadfast man who had become her strongest ally. "Thank you, Jonas, for everything." They spent the next hour planning their approach, knowing they would only get one chance to reveal Malcolm's crimes. The storm gradually subsided outside, but the tension of what lay ahead charged the air between them. "We should get some rest," Jonas finally said. "I'll drive you home." As they walked to his truck, Eliza looked back at the darkened zoo buildings. Somewhere inside, Malcolm thought he had won, that he had silenced her. But she had never been more determined to speak the truth, no matter the consequences. The gala would be her moment to finally give voice to those who couldn't defend themselves. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a final warning of the storm to come. The evening of the gala arrived with a shimmer of false glamour. Crystal champagne glasses clinked while wealthy donors in expensive suits and designer dresses milled about the decorated pavilion. Soft jazz music floated through the air, nearly drowning out the distant sounds of the animals. Eliza stood in the shadows, her heart pounding. She wore her best blazer and slacks, borrowed from a friend since she hadn't planned on attending any galas when she packed for this job. Jonas waited near the service entrance, ready to help if needed. In her bag, she carried copies of shipping, manifests, falsified medical records, and photographs, all the evidence they'd managed to salvage and compile. Malcolm Cray commanded the center of the room like a ringmaster, his polished smile never wavering as he shook hands and accepted praise for his innovative leadership of the zoo. "The animals' welfare has always been our top priority," he announced to a cluster of nodding donors. Eliza's fingers tightened around her bag. The lies flowing so smoothly from his lips made her stomach turn. She watched him work the room, knowing she had to time this perfectly. Too soon, and security might hustle her out. Too late, and the press might leave. She caught Jonas's eye across the room. He gave her a slight nod, the signal that the local newspaper reporter and wildlife conservation representative had arrived. It was time. Taking a deep breath, Eliza stepped forward. "Mr. Cray," she called out, her voice stronger than she expected. "I think it's time we discussed the real state of animal welfare at this zoo." The room didn't fall silent immediately. Conversations trailed off in waves as people turned to look. Malcolm's smile froze, his eyes narrowing as he recognized her. "Dr. Rowan," he said smoothly, "I believe you're no longer employed here." "Security, before anyone moves," Eliza announced, pulling out the first document. "I have evidence of systematic animal abuse and trafficking that the public needs to see." She held up a shipping manifest. "These records show unauthorized transfers of exotic animals, including leopard cubs, through this facility." Now the silence was complete. Malcolm's face reddened. "These are ridiculous accusations from a disgruntled former employee. The dates match perfectly with Balthazar's episodes of illness." Eliza continued, her voice growing stronger. "Each time cubs disappeared, he was found sedated. Not sick, drugged. To keep him docile while his cubs were stolen and sold." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The reporter had pulled out a notebook. Malcolm stepped toward Eliza, his practiced charm cracking. "Security, remove this woman immediately." But Jonas had positioned himself between Eliza and the security guards, and several donors were now examining the copies of documents Eliza had begun distributing. "These shipping codes," one woman said, frowning at a paper, "they don't match our standard wildlife exchange programs." "Because they're not legitimate exchanges," Eliza explained. "They're sales to private collectors. Illegal sales. Lies." Malcolm shouted, his composure finally shattering. "All lies from an incompetent." A sound cut through the pavilion, deep, resonant, powerful. The collective roar of the leopards echoed across the zoo grounds, making the crystal glasses vibrate. Everyone froze. The roar came again, all the leopards calling in unison, as if nature itself was testifying to the truth. In the stunned silence that followed, Eliza spoke quietly. "Balthazar wasn't just sick. He was fighting back against years of abuse. Every animal in this zoo deserves better than to be treated as inventory to be sold off." The wildlife conservation representative stepped forward, already on his phone. "I'm contacting authorities." "Nobody leaves this room." Malcolm lunged toward the exit, but Jonas and two security guards who had been watching the evidence with growing horror moved to block his path. His shoulders slumped in defeat as the sound of approaching police sirens filled the air. The leopards roared once more, their unified voices carrying across the grounds like a victory cry. Eliza felt tears in her eyes as she watched Malcolm being handcuffed, his carefully constructed empire crumbling around him. Donors who had moments ago been laughing at his jokes now turned away in disgust. "The evidence will show everything," Eliza told the gathering crowd of reporters. "The trafficking network, the falsified records, the systematic abuse. But most importantly, it will show that these animals deserve our protection and respect, not exploitation." The police led Malcolm away as camera flashes lit up the night. Jonas appeared at Eliza's side, giving her shoulder a supportive squeeze. Together, they watched their former boss being escorted to a waiting patrol car, his head bowed, his power finally stripped away. In the background, the leopards had fallen silent, as if satisfied that justice had finally been served. Eliza thought of Balthazar, still recovering, but growing stronger each day, and felt a deep sense of vindication. The truth had come out, just as she had promised him it would not. In the weeks following Malcolm Cray's arrest, the zoo transformed. Like a garden after rain, the morning sun streamed through Eliza Rowan's office window, her new office, with her name freshly painted on the door as lead wildlife care specialist. She watched as federal agents led another coordinated rescue of trafficked animals, their vehicles moving purposefully through the grounds. 3 more cubs recovered, Jonas said softly, entering with 2 cups of coffee. His familiar presence brought warmth to the room. That makes 7 total now. He handed her a steaming cup, their fingers brushing in a way that made her smile. I still can't believe how deep Malcolm's network went, Eliza said, taking a grateful sip. But watching those cubs reunite with their mothers, she trailed off, emotion catching in her throat. The new zoo director, Dr. Sarah Chan, had immediately implemented Eliza's suggested reforms. Gone were the days of profit over welfare. The animals' health came first now, and the positive changes showed. Nowhere was this more evident than in the leopard enclosure. Eliza and Jonas walked together to check on Balthazar, their shoulders touching. The great leopard's recovery had become a symbol of hope for everyone at the zoo. Where once he had laid collapsed and weak, now he showed more strength each day. Look at him, Eliza whispered as they approached. Balthazar stood at the edge of his enclosure, his golden eyes bright and alert. The scars remained, but his coat gleamed with renewed health. When he saw Eliza, he made a soft chuffing sound, a greeting they'd come to share. He knows who saved him, Jonas said, slipping his hand into hers. Their relationship had grown naturally in the aftermath of their shared ordeal, built on trust and mutual respect. A small crowd had gathered nearby. Eliza recognized a reporter from National Geographic, here to document the zoo's transformation, and the story that had made headlines across the country. The attention still made her uncomfortable, but she'd learned to use it to advocate for better animal protection laws. Dr. Rowan, the reporter called out, could we get a few more photos of you with Balthazar? Your story has inspired wildlife advocates nationwide. Eliza nodded, though she knew the real heroes were the animals themselves. As if understanding his cue, Balthazar rose to his full height, a sight that still took her breath away. He pressed one massive paw against the glass, and Eliza placed her hand opposite his, a gesture that had become their ritual. Sometimes I think he waited to fully recover until he knew Malcolm couldn't hurt anyone else. Jonas mused, watching them. Malcolm's trial had concluded swiftly, with overwhelming evidence. The former zoo director now faced years in prison, his reputation and criminal enterprise thoroughly destroyed. More importantly, his conviction had led to stronger oversight of zoos nationwide. Later that evening, as the sun set, Eliza and Jonas sat on a bench near the leopard enclosure. The air was warm, filled with the gentle sounds of the zoo at rest. Balthazar lounged regally on his favorite rock, watching over his pride with restored dignity. You know, Jonas said, his arm around her shoulders. When I first saw you standing up to Malcolm, I knew you were special, but I had no idea how much you'd change everything. Eliza leaned into him, feeling truly content. We changed it together. She corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. A chorus of leopard calls rose from the enclosure, no longer sounds of distress, but strong, healthy voices united in the growing dusk. Balthazar's deep roar led them, echoing across the zoo grounds. Eliza felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. Listen to them, she whispered. That's what justice sounds like. The leopard's calls faded into the evening air. Balthazar rose once more, moving with fluid grace that had seemed impossible during those dark days of his collapse. He paused at the highest point of his enclosure, silhouetted against the sunset, a living testament to resilience and recovery. Eliza felt Jonas squeeze her hand. In that moment, watching Balthazar stand tall and free from fear, she knew that some victories went beyond professional recognition or public acclaim. The real triumph was in staying true to what she believed in finding the courage to stand firm when it mattered most. and in discovering that she wasn't alone in her fight. For what was right done as darkness settled over the zoo, the lights along the paths began to glow softly. Balthazar settled among his pride, finally at peace. And Eliza, with Jonas beside her and her convictions vindicated, felt the same deep contentment. They had all risen together, stronger for having faced the storm. Thank you for watching. If even one moment stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow with another story that speaks to the heart.